The bronze edge of dawn arrived, not with a clash of shields, but with the subtle, creeping light filtering through the worn canvas of the Achaean tents. Telas, a man whose hands were built for a bowstring and not a sword, shivered despite the thick wool cloak draped over his armor. His station was on the bluff overlooking the long line of beached ships, a silent guardian against the Trojans' desperate recurring night raids. 10 years of this siege had reduced the war to moments of grim routine, punctuated by flashes of unimaginable carnage. Telas missed the olive groves of Ithaca, the simple, honest weight of a fisherman's net, and the sound of his wife's laughter. All he heard was the ceaseless, hungry roar of the Aegean and the quiet, heavy breathing of sleeping men. Tonight, however, the air felt different to still, too charged with expectation, like the held breath before an arrow launch. He knelt behind a cluster of thorny bushes, his famous Cretan bow resting across his knees, the laminated wood cool beneath his touch. The bow was his god, his shield, and his only loyal friend in this hostile land. His eyes, trained by years of hunting small game, scanned the beach below. It was a mosaic of ship prows, cargo crates, and dark shadows. Nothing moved on the sand except for the receding tide, which left glistening tracks like tears. Yet an instinct honed by endless waiting pricked at the back of his neck, warning him of something unseen. He slowly raised his bow, the movement practiced and fluid, fitting an arrow notched with a deadly bronze tip to the string. The weight of the draw was familiar, the taut tension a comfort he understood better than human touch. He held the breath in his chest, allowing his eyes to drift along the edge of the dunes, where the plain met the shore. And then he saw it. A flicker of movement, impossibly close to the closest row of ships. It was not a soldier. It was small, cloaked in dark, heavy fabric, and moving with a furtive, panicked haste. A woman, a Trojan woman, dressed in the simple, dusty robes of a civilian, far from the safety of the city walls. Telas felt a sudden cold wash of confusion. What madness possessed her to venture into the Greek camp at the hour of dawn? His duty was clear: eliminate the threat. Spy, a saboteur, perhaps even a desperate fanatic. He adjusted his aim, sighting down the shaft, the bronze point aimed for the center of her narrow back. But his fingers, which had loosed hundreds of deadly shafts without a tremor, hesitated. This was not the brute size of a warrior, not the familiar threat of a charging spearman. This was something fragile, exposed. He lowered the bow slightly, cursing himself for the weakness, for the memories of his own wife that suddenly clouded his vision. The woman, whose name was Thea, paused beside the huge hull of the ship Argos, Captain Nestor's flagship. She was clutching a small ceramic amphora, handling it with the reverence of a high priestess. The amphora was clearly not filled with explosives or flammable oils. It was too small, too precious in its handling. They moved to the ship's massive wooden rudder, now half buried in the sand due to an old storm. She began to dig frantically at the sand beside it, using her bare hands, the ceramic jar clutched beneath one arm. Her movements were desperate, clumsy, and wholly unthreatening, confirming Telas's suspicion that she was no spy. He watched, transfixed by the simple, raw urgency of her action, forgetting his position and the danger. They finally cleared enough sand to reveal a small, dark bundle wrapped tightly in linen. She snatched up the bundle, her face hidden by the hood of her cloak, and gently placed the amphora in the shallow hole. Telas realized then the amphora was an offering, a burial gift, or perhaps a plea to the gods. The bundle, now held against her chest, was revealed to be a child, dead and terribly small. A sudden, sharp intake of breath escaped Telas's lips, a sound instantly drowned by the crashing wave. Thea was performing a secret ritual, burying her lost infant in the foreign, conquered sand of the beach, far from the pyres of Troy. She was not a threat to the Achaean fleet. She was a victim of the siege, seeking a moment of peace for her dead child. Telas felt the icy knot of military necessity tighten in his stomach. He should still report her, take her prisoner. But what crime had she committed? Mourning, an act universally sacred, even among enemies. He watched as she began to cover the amphora with sand, her movements slow now, heavy with grief. As she worked, a sound reached them both, the shifting footsteps of a small, well-disciplined Achaean patrol returning from the northern flank. They were drunk, loud, and stumbling, unaware of the grim tableau playing out on the sand below. Telus's blood ran cold. If they saw Thea, she would not be taken prisoner. She would be instantly killed, or worse. The patrol, led by a rough Thessalian named Kylon, was only 50 paces from her position, approaching fast. Telus had seconds to act, and only two choices: let the patrol discover her and face the consequences, or intervene. Intervening meant revealing his position, breaking discipline, and potentially drawing the wrath of his own commanders. But the sight of the mother, shielding her dead child with her body, was a force stronger than any general's command. Telus made his choice. He quickly unfastened a heavy bronze drinking cup from his belt. With a silent prayer to Hades, he hurled the cup with all his strength, not toward they, but far down the beach toward the crashing waves. The cup skipped across the sand and struck a loose pile of shields stacked by the Argos, creating a loud, echoing clatter. The sound, sharp and metallic, instantly stopped the drunken patrol. What was that? A raiding party? Kylon shouted, slurring his words, drawing his sword clumsily. The patrol immediately turned toward the noise. Their focus shifted entirely away from Thea and her sad work. They, startled by the noise, froze, looking wildly toward the source of the sound, her eyes wide with terror. She saw Telus's movement on the bluff, a shadow framed by the rising bronze light of the sun. Their eyes met across the distance, a fleeting moment of contact between killer and mourner, Greek and Trojan. Telus did not move, but simply gave a subtle, urgent gesture with his head. Go. Now they understood. Her grief-stricken mind snapped back into survival mode. She quickly heaped the last of the sand over the amphora, leaving the small burial place indistinguishable from the rest of the beach. Clutching the linen-wrapped child, she slipped silently into the thick shadows beneath the beached ship hulls. Kylon and his patrol, swords drawn, began stumbling down the beach toward the source of the noise. Check the crates. Could be one of those gutter rats trying to pilfer the silver. Kylon barked to his men. They passed within 5 feet of the Argos's rudder, completely unaware of the recent burial or the woman hiding under the keel. Telus watched the woman's shadow move, a dark blur slipping away from the ships and toward the dubious safety of the dunes. He tracked her until she vanished into the growing mist and the confusing shadows of the scrubland bordering the plain. The patrol, finding nothing but the fallen cup and shields, grumbled about shadows and drunken hallucinations. Kylon dismissed the incident, kicking sand over the area Telus had designated as safe for the moment. They turned and continued their slow, weary march toward the barracks, the crisis averted. Telus finally allowed himself to breathe, the long-held air escaping in a shuddering gasp. His chest felt tight, not from the effort of the bow, but from the unbearable weight of the compassion he had just shown. He had violated his oath, jeopardized his own position, and risked the safety of the entire camp for a dead Trojan child. The sun climbed higher, casting long, sharp shadows of the ships across the sand. The true edge of dawn had arrived. It was a time for steel and clarity, a time when such sentimental weakness could cost lives. He picked up his bow, the bronze arrow still nocked, and felt the familiar certainty of his purpose return. But the certainty was flawed now, stained by the memory of Thea's eyes. He scanned the distant walls of Troy, now shining a defiant ochre in the sunlight. How many other secret burials, how many desperate, quiet acts of life and death lay hidden in the sands of this brutal, endless war? The war was fought by heroes and generals, but it was paid for by the grief of women like Thea. He stood and stretched, the stiffness in his joints a testament to the long, fruitless watch. He walked slowly back to the main path, joining the stream of soldiers beginning their day. The smell of burning wood and roasting meat, the sounds of shouting sergeants, and the clang of hammer on bronze quickly enveloped him. He was Telus, the Achaean archer, a killer of men, a defender of the fleet. Yet somewhere beneath the rudder of the great Argos, a small ceramic jar rested in the sand, a secret tomb. And in the mist of the distant plain, a Trojan mother carried her empty bundle home, protected by an anonymous enemy. This silent truce, this infinitesimal moment of shared humanity, was the true cost of the bronze edge of dawn. He knew, with chilling clarity, that if he saw Thea again, he would have to shoot, or she would recognize him. The war demanded that the line between them be bronze, sharp, and unforgiving, but for one fragile, fleeting moment, the line had dissolved. Telis walked on, his helmet heavy on his head, the taste of salt and ash on his tongue. The sun was fully risen now, casting a blinding glare across the vast, empty plain. Today, the fighting would begin again, the cycle of death and vengeance continuing its monotonous loop. He wondered what They was thinking now, what she was telling the gods she had appealed to. Did she feel a flicker of gratitude for the anonymous hand that had saved her? Or did she only feel the cold, endless anger of a mother who had lost everything to the Achaean invaders? Telis strapped on his quiver, the feathers of his deadly arrows brushing against his neck. He had a duty, a loyalty that superseded his conscience. He would aim true today. But he carried a secret now, a silent weight that pressed down harder than his armor, the knowledge that the enemy was human. The story of the Bronze Edge of Dawn reveals that compassion often demands a greater price than conflict. Like, share, and subscribe to Storycraft Studio.